the Whispering Wood. When Jake and Ellie moved to their grandparents' rural home, they discovered an ancient treehouse in the dense woods nearby. It was overgrown with moss and vines. Its wooden frame warped with age, but to them it was magical. Jake wanted to restore it. Ellie, his cautious younger sister, was less eager, especially after noticing strange carvings in the wood. Runes, spirals, and stick figures etched into every plank. "Probably just some old kids playing around," Jake said, brushing off her concerns. First night they spent in the treehouse, they heard whispers. At first they thought it was the wind, but the voices grew louder, forming words neither could understand. "It's just the trees," Jake reassured Ellie, though even he didn't believe it. The next day, they found an old tin box under the floorboards. Inside were yellow diary pages, scrawled in a child's shaky handwriting. The entries described a series of games played in the treehouse. Hide and seek with the shadows, tag with the wind, Red Rover across the branches. Each game ended with the ominous warning, "Don't let them catch you." That night, the treehouse grew colder as the whispers returned. "Play with us," they urged. "It's your turn now." Ellie wanted to leave, but Jake insisted they stay, eager to prove he wasn't scared. The whispers became screams, and the entire treehouse shook violently. Ellie bolted for the ladder, but it snapped beneath her, leaving her dangling. She screamed for Jake, but when she looked back, he was pressed against the wall, his face frozen in terror. The wood seemed to ripple around him, pulling him into the planks. His eyes locked onto Ellie as he mouthed one final word, "Run." By the time Ellie reached safety, the treehouse was gone. In its place was a gnarled, blackened tree with fresh carvings on its bark. One saved, one taken. Jake's face was among them, twisted into a silent scream. 2. The feeding perk. Evan and his son Max had always dreamed of building a treehouse together. When they moved into their new home, they found the perfect oak tree in the backyard. They spent weeks designing the structure, complete with a balcony, rope ladder, and Max's favorite feature, a pulley system to bring up snacks. Max loved his treehouse until one night when he rushed inside, pale and trembling. "There's a bird, man outside," he whispered. "It's sitting on the railing." Evan dismissed it as a nightmare, but the next morning he found scratches on the wood, deep gouges that looked like claw marks. Uneasy, he set up a motion, activated camera to catch whatever animal was responsible. The footage the next morning was disturbing. At exactly 2 a.m., a humanoid figure perched on the balcony. Its wings were skeletal, its face sharp and bird-like, and its eyes glowed faintly. It tilted its head toward the camera before vanishing into the darkness. Evan wanted to tear the treehouse down, but Max begged him not to. Against his better judgment, Evan relented, but he forbade Max from going inside at night. One evening, Max disappeared. Evan searched everywhere, finally climbing to the treehouse. Inside, he found feathers, long, black, and oily, scattered across the floor. On the railing was a crude carving of a boy with wings flying away. A week later, the creature returned. This time, it perched on Evan's roof, its voice rasping. "You built me a perch. Now I've taken what's mine." The treehouse stands empty now, but every night, Evan hears the beating of enormous wings. 3. Blood sap. Amy, Cole, and Jordan stumbled across an old rotting treehouse deep in the woods. Its planks were blackened and the air around it felt cold despite the summer heat. Thinking it would be a fun project, Amy, Cole, and Jordan stumbled across an old rotting treehouse deep in the woods. Planks were blackened, and the air around it felt cold despite the summer heat. Thinking it would be a fun project, the 3 teens decided to restore it. As they worked, strange things began to happen. Every nail they hammered into the wood caused it to ooze a thick, dark red liquid. Looks like the tree's bleeding, Cole joked, but the metallic smell made Amy uneasy. Later, Jordan uncovered a loose floorboard. Beneath it lay a small, hand-carved doll, its face scratched out, with its arms twisted into unnatural angles. Someone's idea of a prank, he muttered, tossing it aside. But that night, Amy had vivid nightmares of a woman hanging from the tree's branches, her face contorted in agony. The next day, Cole found an old newspaper clipping stuffed into the tree's bark. It described the lynching of a local woman accused of witchcraft a century ago. The article mentioned that the tree had dripped with blood for days afterward, leading locals to avoid it. Ignoring the warnings, the group continued working. The treehouse seemed to resist them, its planks rotting faster than they could replace them. The red sap began seeping from every crack, and the air grew heavy with a suffocating metallic stench. One evening, Cole stayed behind to work alone. When Amy and Jordan returned the next morning, they found him fused to the treehouse floor. His body was mangled, twisted in a grotesque embrace with the wood. His mouth was frozen in a silent scream, and above him, fresh words were carved into the planks. More blood to feed the tree. Amy and Jordan fled, but the treehouse continued to grow, its branches spreading wider and darker. Locals say the tree drips blood on numerous nights, and anyone who ventures too close hears whispers. Play with us, or join him. 4. Watcher in the North Hole. Sam loved the treehouse his parents had built for him. It was his sanctuary, a place to read, draw, and escape the world. One afternoon, he discovered a strange knothole in the wall. When he peered through, all he saw was darkness. That night, Sam swore the knothole blinked at him. His parents laughed, saying it was just his imagination. But the next day he noticed something strange. The view instead of seeing the familiar backyard, he saw a warped version. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, with faint shadows splitting between them. Over the next week, the knothole grew larger. Sam heard faint whispers whenever he approached it. Stay with me. Watch with me. He covered it with tape, but the next morning, the tape was gone, and the knothole had grown wide enough to fit his hand. That night, the whispers turned into screams. The treehouse trembled as clawed fingers reached through the knothole, scratching the wood. Sam tried to run, but the treehouse door slammed shut. He felt the wood bending around him, pulling him closer to the knothole. Before he was dragged through, he caught a glimpse of the other side. The dark world beyond was filled with shadowy figures, their glowing yellow eyes fixed on him. They were waiting, grinning. When Sam's parents found the treehouse the next morning, it was empty. The knothole was gone, replaced by a crude carving of a single unblinking eye. If you climb into the treehouse today, some say you can still hear whispers. Stay, watch, join us. 5. The Rooted Children. In a quiet village, a group of children discovered a pristine treehouse deep in the woods. It looked newly built, despite the surrounding forest being centuries old. Inside, they found a group of pale, silent children sitting perfectly still. Come play, one of the pale children whispered. Against their better judgment, the newcomers agreed. They played hide, and seek, tag, and other games, but the rules were strange. The pale children would always win, laughing in hollow, mechanical tones. As the sun set, the pale children grew more animated. Their laughter turned shrill and their movements became jerky, almost puppet-like. When one of the newcomers tried to leave, they found the ladder gone, the exit sealed. The walls of the treehouse began to pulse, and the pale children's faces twisted in cruel, inhuman shapes. Their eyes became hollow voids, their grins stretching unnaturally wide. We were like you once, one of them whispered. But the tree claimed us. Now it's your turn. Roots burst through the floorboards, snaking around the newcomers' ankles. They screamed and struggled, but the roots were impossibly strong, dragging them deeper into the wood. The pale children began chanting in eerie unison, their voices echoing like wind through a hollow cave. Feed the roots. Join the tree. Stay with us for eternity. One by one, the children were consumed. Their skin turned pale, their limbs stiff, their eyes empty. The last child, Anna, fought harder than the others, clawing at the walls and begging for help. As the roots tightened around her, she glimpsed something horrifying, a grotesque face in the bark, twisted with anger and sorrow, watching her struggle. "You can't escape," it growled, its voice ancient and deep. In a final act of desperation, Anna reached for a jagged piece of wood and stabbed it into one of the roots. A screech filled the air, and the treehouse began to shudder violently. The pale children screamed as their bodies crumbled into ash. Anna tumbled from the treehouse, just as it collapsed into a mass of writhing roots. When she looked back, the tree was gone, leaving only a scorched patch of earth. The villagers found Anna hours later, delirious and shaking. She tried to warn them about the treehouse, but they dismissed her as traumatized. Years later, children began disappearing again, and whispers of a new treehouse deep in the woods spread through the village. Anna left town, but the nightmares followed her. In her dreams, the pale children still called to her, their voices soft and inviting. "Come back, Anna. The tree still remembers you." 6. The Singing Treehouse. It began with a melody. Every evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Beth could hear soft, haunting music coming from the forest behind her house. Her parents said it was probably the wind whistling through the trees, but Beth felt drawn to investigate. One night, armed with a flashlight, she followed the sound. It led her to a treehouse she'd never noticed before, even though she'd played in these woods for years. The structure was impossibly tall. Its beams, twisted like the tree, had grown into the wood itself. The melody grew louder as she climbed the rope ladder, and when she reached the top, she found the source, a rusted music box sitting on a small table. Beth wound the music box out of curiosity. The melody shifted, becoming sweeter, more hypnotic. As the music played, Beth felt an overwhelming sense of peace, until she noticed movement outside the treehouse. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows. Dozens of figures stood at the base of the tree, their faces blank and featureless. Slowly, they began to climb. Beth panicked and tried to descend, but the ladder had disappeared. The treehouse groaned as the figures began pressing against its walls, their featureless faces peering through the cracks. She screamed as the walls started to collapse inward. When she woke up, it was morning, and she was lying on the forest floor. The treehouse was gone, and so was the music box. But the melody stayed with her, playing softly in the back of her mind. Years later, when her younger brother went missing, she found him sitting in his room, winding a familiar music box. "They taught me the song," he said, smiling. "It's my turn to go now." 7. The Hanging Treehouse. The old treehouse on Ridge Hill had a dark reputation. Locals whispered that it was cursed, that anyone who entered it was doomed to die. Ryan and his friends, eager for a thrill, decided to spend the night there to prove the rumors wrong. Treehouse looked ordinary at first, except for a single rope dangling from its rafters. "Probably an old swing," Ryan said, brushing off the unease. As night fell, they lit lanterns and sat in a circle, telling ghost stories. At midnight, the rope began to sway. Ryan joked it was the wind, but there was no breeze. Then faint creaking sounds came from above, like footsteps on the roof. One of the friends, Sarah, climbed the ladder to check it out, but as soon as her head poked through the hatch, she screamed and fell backward. When they looked, the rope was no longer dangling. It had formed a noose, and above it was a figure in shadow, swaying slightly as if hung. Its head turned slowly toward them. Panicking, They scrambled for the ladder, but it was gone. The walls of the treehouse began to shift, becoming darker, tighter, and suffocating. Ryan's friends disappeared one by one, their screams cut short as the noose snapped taut each time. Ryan was the last to go. As the noose tightened around his neck, he realized the truth. The treehouse was the executioner, punishing all who dared to disturb it. When the townsfolk found the site the next morning, there was no treehouse, just a tree with 5 ropes swaying in the breezy. 8. The collector's treehouse. Abby loved collecting trinkets, so when she discovered a strange, abandoned treehouse in her backyard after a storm, it felt like fate. Inside, she found shelves lined with dusty jars. Each jar contained something odd: a button, a lock of hair, a cracked tooth. Curious, she opened one, and the air in the treehouse turned icy. The jar's contents, a single shriveled finger, seemed to twitch before dissolving into ash. That night, Abby had nightmares of a shadowy figure whispering, "Put it back." Over the following days, she began to find more jars. They appeared in her bedroom, her school bag, even her pockets. Each jar contained something more grotesque: a rotting ear, a bloodied doll's eye. She tried throwing them away, but they always reappeared perfectly intact. One evening, the treehouse beckoned her back. This time, the jars on the shelves weren't empty. They contained faces, twisted, screaming faces, pressing against the glass. The shelves stretched endlessly with her name carved above the largest one. Before she could run, the jars began to rattle. A voice filled the treehouse. "Join the collection." Abby's screams echoed through the woods that night. The treehouse has remained empty since, but locals swear they hear faint cries coming from inside. And if you look through the cracked window, you'll see a new jar on the shelf with Abby's face frozen inside. 9. The treehouse that grew. Emma's new house came with a strange bonus. A treehouse so large it almost resembled a second home. Her parents were thrilled, but Emma hated it. It always felt like it was watching her, especially at night when the moonlight made its windows glimmer. Weeks passed, and Emma noticed something unsettled. The treehouse was growing. Its planks stretched, its walls bulged, and new rooms seemed to appear overnight. Her parents thought she was imagining things until they saw it too. One morning, Emma woke to find a staircase leading directly from her bedroom to the treehouse. Against her better judgment, she climbed it. Inside, the walls were covered in photographs of her family, her friends, even strangers she didn't recognize. At the center of the room was a mirror. When Emma looked into it, her reflection smiled, even though she wasn't. It whispered, "This is your home now." The treehouse continued to grow, consuming their backyard, their house, and eventually the entire neighborhood. No one who entered ever returned. From a distance, it looked like a quaint, rustic structure, but those who ventured closer swore they heard Emma's laughter echoing from inside. 10. The silent visitors. Leo and his twin sister Maya loved their treehouse. It was their fortress, their hideout, their world. But one night, everything changed. As they played a board game, they heard a knock. Not from the door, but from below the floorboards. Thinking it was an animal, they ignored it, but the knocking grew louder, more insistent. Then came the scratching. When Leo lifted a floorboard, he found nothing but dirt. Still, the noises continued every night. Soon, they started seeing footprints in the dirt below the treehouse. Bare human footprints. One night, they stayed late, determined to catch the intruders. Around midnight, shadows began to move in the trees. Figures emerged, tall, gaunt shapes with hollow eyes and crooked limbs. They surrounded the treehouse, staring silently. Leo whispered to Maya not to move, but the figures began climbing. As their skeletal fingers gripped the planks, the twins huddled in terror. When the first one reached the window, it opened its mouth impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Twin screams echoed into the night, but no one came to help. By morning, the treehouse was empty. Floorboards stained with bloody handprints. The figures still roam the woods, and some say the treehouse is waiting for someone else to knock. Well, buried children. The backyard was unremarkable at first until the three siblings, Sophia, Jamie, and Oliver, discovered an old treehouse hidden in the dense foliage. The treehouse seemed oddly untouched by time, as though it had been waiting for them. Inside, they found dusty shelves, broken furniture, and piles of old toys, marbles, dolls, and toy soldiers, all covered in dirt. Sophia picked up a cracked doll and recoiled when she noticed that its eyes seemed to follow her. That night, she swore she heard a whisper, "Help us." Determined to solve the mystery, the siblings began digging around the treehouse the next day. To their horror, they unearthed tiny human bones buried beneath the roots. The discovery sent chills down their spines, but their curiosity outweighed their fear. The next night, the treehouse came alive. The toys rattled and moved on their own, their faces twisting into grotesque grins. Whispers echoed from the walls. Growing louder and more insistent, "You woke us. Now you must stay." Sophia tried to flee, but the ladder dissolved into roots, trapping them all inside. The treehouse groaned, and the walls began to close in. Oliver screamed as the toys lunged at him, their tiny hands tearing into his skin. Jamie begged for mercy, but the whispers only laughed. When the parents arrived the next morning, the treehouse was empty, the siblings nowhere to be found. Inside, 3 new dolls sat neatly on the shelf. Each one wore a hauntingly familiar expression of terror. The treehouse remains abandoned, but at night some say they can hear the voices of children calling out from within. "Help us. Please don't wake them again." 13. The door without a key. Daniel was thrilled when his parents let him renovate the old treehouse in the backyard. After weeks of work, it became his secret hideaway. One morning, however, he noticed something strange. A door had appeared on one of the walls. It was made of dark wood, unlike the rest of the treehouse, and it had no handle or keyhole. The door seemed impossibly old, its surface covered in strange carvings that shifted when Daniel looked away. At first he ignored it, but the door began to change. Some days it seemed to pulse as though it were breathing. Other times it emitted a faint humming noise. Then one night the door swung open on its own. Beyond the door was a void, a deep, infinite darkness. From it came a voice soft and inviting. "Step inside. We'll give you anything you desire." Daniel slammed the door shut, but it reopened every night. One evening he heard his mother's voice coming from the void, begging for help. Desperate, he stepped through. The next morning, his parents found the treehouse empty. The strange door was gone, but the wall where it had been was blackened, as if scorched. Carved into the wood were the words, "One taken, the door remains." The treehouse was torn down, but the family never escaped its curse. Years later, Daniel's sister awoke to find a new door on her bedroom wall. 14. The mirror room. Sophie loved the treehouse her dad had built. The small room lined with mirrors was her favorite feature. She'd spend hours watching her reflection as she practiced dance moves or tried on outfits. Sophie had always been fascinated by the mirror room in her treehouse. She loved watching herself, practicing her dance moves, or simply gazing at her reflection. But after the incident, everything changed. One night, while dancing alone, Sophie noticed that her reflection no longer mimicked her movements. The figure in the mirror danced slowly, each movement calculated, deliberate, as though mocking her. Sophie stopped mid-spin, and the reflection continued to twirl, the grin on its face widening, becoming grotesque. She turned to leave, but the reflection's eyes followed her every move. "Where do you think you're going?" The reflection whispered, though Sophie never opened her mouth. Terrified, she backed away from the mirrors, but the room seemed to grow darker. The floor beneath her feet creaked. The walls seemed to close in, and the mirrors began to crack. The figure in the glass started to distort. Its figure in the glass started to distort, its features becoming more monstrous with each passing second. Sophie reached for the door, only to find that it wouldn't open. The mirrors reflected her struggling, but now each one showed a different version of her, twisted, broken, and pleading for help. As she turned to scream, her own reflection smiled cruelly, its mouth stretching unnaturally wide. "You're mine now," it hissed as Sophie's own face twisted into a dark, eerie grin. Before she could react, the mirrors shattered, and shards of glass flew toward her, embedding themselves into her skin. The reflection in the shattered pieces laughed in unison, its voice echoing in the room. When the treehouse was later found, the mirrors were gone, and Sophie was never seen again. But sometimes, if you stand outside the treehouse late at night, you can hear soft whispers coming from the inside, along with the sound of slow, echoing footsteps. 15. The Forest's Call. The 5 friends, Tyler, Emma, Rachel, Jake, and Tom, decided to spend a night in the forest near the abandoned treehouse. They were skeptical of the rumors, but intrigued by the idea of exploring something forbidden. The air was thick with fog as they approached the treehouse, and the eerie silence of the forest weighed heavily on their spirits. The moment they set foot inside, the world seemed to change. The sky grew dark, and the air turned cold, causing them to shiver. The treehouse felt wrong. It was too quiet. The walls whispered their names in strange, foreign languages, and the floorboards creaked as though something was moving beneath them. Tyler, ever the leader, was the first to approach the window. But when he looked outside, the forest had vanished. In its place was an endless, swirling void. They were no longer in the forest, they knew. The voices from the walls became louder, and the friends began to feel a strange pull toward the center of the room, where a dark shape loomed. As they walked closer, the shadowy figure became clearer. An enormous, hollow-eyed face made of twisted branches, its mouth stretched into a permanent, malicious grin. The ground beneath their feet gave way, and the treehouse began to fall apart, splintering into pieces. The friends screamed, but the treehouse's twisted roots reached up and pulled them into the ground, trapping them in the dark void. By the time the sun rose, only the remains of the treehouse were left, half buried in the earth. The forest had disappeared, and no trace of the 5 friends was ever found. Locals claimed that on certain nights, the sounds of laughter and whispering voices echo through the trees, and those who dare to approach the site say they can see shadows moving in the branches above. 16. The Root's Revenge. The massive ancient tree was revered by locals. Its gnarled roots and towering branches cast long shadows, and its treehouse was a popular tourist attraction for years. But beneath its beauty, something far darker lurked. The tree had a secret, a dark, ancient power that had been disturbed by the arrival of human curiosity. After the grand opening of the treehouse, strange things began to happen. Visitors reported seeing shadows move along the walls, feeling a cold presence in the air, and hearing whispers in the air, and hearing whispers in the wind. But it wasn't until that fateful night when the true horrors were unleashed. A group of young tourists decided to spend the night in the treehouse. As they sat around the campfire, they noticed the tree's branches shifting unnaturally. The leaves rustled in a rhythm that sounded like a whisper. Then, without warning, the tree began to tremble, its roots breaking free from the earth. The roots surged upward, breaking through the floorboards of the treehouse, and the group was trapped. One by one, the roots wrapped around their bodies, pulling them into the ground. The terrified screams of the tourists echoed into the night, but no one could reach them in time. The next day, when authorities arrived, there was no trace of the group. Only the treehouse remained, now with thick, dark veins running up the tree's bark and deep cracks in the wooden planks. The roots had burrowed into the earth, and the tree seemed to pulse, as if it were alive, feeding on the souls it had claimed. Locals say that the tree still seeks revenge for its desecration. Some nights, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint whispers of those who were taken, trapped forever within the tree's gnarled roots, their spirits feeding the ancient force that resides within. 17. The Haunted Swing. At the summer camp, the haunted treehouse with its eerie swing had always been a subject of legend. No one dared to go near it after dusk, especially when the swing began to sway back and forth without any wind. The camp counselors often warned the children to stay away from it, but one girl, Lily, decided to confront the fear head-on. She returned to the treehouse that night, determined to prove the stories were just that. Stories, as she sat on the swing. As she sat on the swing, the quiet of the night settled around her, but soon she noticed something strange. The swing began to move on its own, the creaking of the ropes growing louder with each pass. Lily's heart raced as the wind picked up, but she remained seated. Then, from the shadows of the treehouse, something appeared. It was a figure, its face hidden in darkness. Lily tried to call out, but no words came from her mouth. The figure stepped closer and she saw its eyes, black, hollow pits, staring straight at her. "Why did you come?" The voice whispered, its tone cold and filled with malice. Before she could react, the figure lunged, its hands grabbing her by the arms and pulling her from the swing. The world around her blurred as she was dragged into the darkness. She fought to scream, but no sound came out, as if the very air had stolen her voice. By morning, Lily was gone. The counselors found the swing still swaying, but no trace of Lily remained. Only the faint sound of her distant, silent scream could be heard in the wind. And when the other children came to investigate, they saw something horrifying. The figure of Lily, standing at the edge of the forest, her eyes hollow and empty, her mouth stretched into a twisted grin. 18. The echoing laughter. The treehouse in the park was said to be cursed, and every night the echoing laughter would fill the air, as if mocking anyone brave enough to approach. Some said the laughter came from the spirits of children who had vanished long ago. Others claimed it was a woman, never come closer. Finally, desperate, the laughter was just a dream, silent investigation. He climbed up to the treehouse one night, but as soon as his foot touched the first rung of the ladder, the laughter began. It was soft at first, like distant giggles carried by the wind, but soon it grew louder, echoing all around him. The laughter sounded like it was coming from all directions, making his head spin. Tyler climbed faster, trying to escape the maddening sound, but the higher he went, the more the laughter consumed him. It wasn't just voices anymore. It was something deeper, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound that made his heart race. He finally reached the top, but the laughter stopped abruptly. Instead, a whisper filled the air. "You shouldn't have come." Suddenly, a cold hand grabbed his ankle. He screamed as he tried to break free, but the grip tightened, pulling him down. The laughter returned, now filled with rage, as Tyler was dragged into the dark void beneath the treehouse. The next day, his body was found at the foot of the tree, lifeless and contorted in a way that no human body should be. The laughter had ceased, but those who passed by the park at night still hear it, louder than ever before. Tyler's face, twisted in terror, is said to be reflected in the glass of nearby swings, his laugh now echoing in the trees forever.